remember texting a buddy and saying, we need to buy, $35 or $40 million worth of houses in the next 60 days. Send me everything on MLS built from 1985 and newer, because we're going to buy everything. We're going to make everything built 1985 and newer. We're going to do the Blackstone model. And then we also started buying these new home neighborhoods then.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, we are joined by Aaron Amuchastegui, and I feel like we just got schooled on so many things. I like on such every an insane part of our business. Yeah, such an insanely high level. So if you guys have never heard of Aaron Amuchastegui before, he has been around the real estate world for a long time. He has been on all sorts of different real estate podcasts, media, those sort of things. He is one of the top players out there in the real estate world, to the point that he is directly competing with like Blackstone and some of these big hedge funds, right? Yep. And, on top of all of that, he does it in a way that allows him to also have like a cool life and not have to be like a super crotchety business guy.
He's very balanced in everything he does in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of fun, makes a lot of money, does great in business.
Exactly. Yeah, he just does everything super well. And he has done, what do you say, estimated 2,000 flips that he's bought, mostly from the foreclosure auctions over the last, 15 years. He owns millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate. And one of the great things about this episode is he goes into the systemization about how he does all of that, even down to how he systematizes the conversations with his contractors, how he systematizes his scheduling of all that, everything, and it's just
cut and paste it and it'll work.
Yeah, just cut and paste it. And kind of one of the crazy things is as he's going through it, it's not that freaking complicated. He's just doing the small stuff better than everybody else. And he has his rule book and he has his basically standards that he forces people to meet. And if they don't meet, he gets rid of them. And if they do, then, he uses them to build his incredible system that is just churning out money right now.
Yep, it is. And towards the end, he gets into some of his predictions and all that sort of stuff. And he gets kind of dials into an explanation on cap rates and why he thinks you need to buy off the market at, 30% below the peak. So that is a really interesting thing for anybody out there looking for expertise on what to expect and how to stay active, quite honestly.
Exactly. Yeah. And that I think that whole thing is very valuable to you about, if you give him a follow on Instagram or you reach out to him, which you definitely should have in this episode.
Definitely follow him.
He is one of the most respected minds when it comes to the economy, not only regarding real estate, but also just in general. He spends an incredible amount of time studying it. He's super passionate about it. And he drops a ton of predictions about what's going to happen with real estate over the next little bit and stuff that you can do to prepare to capitalize on those opportunities that they come together. So either way, really incredible episode. This is when we were going through this episode, I was like, are we real podcasters now? We're having this guy on here.
Right. So, we've made it.
Yeah, we've made it. Someone that, I've looked up to for a very long time. So it was super cool to have him on. So definitely reach out to Aaron. And if you enjoy this show, you should please share it with everyone else who might also enjoy hearing this kind of information. If you don't know anyone who would enjoy the stuff that Aaron talks about in the show, you got to find new friends. Honestly, because your friends are not focused on the right things, because there is nothing but incredible knowledge in this episode. So please share with everybody that you can. And then also too, if you want to start finding off-market deals so that you can start to apply these systems that Aaron's going to teach you, you should go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free. You can get your free 5-step guide, start generating off-market leads and closing deals yourself. And then you can start making real money. And then someday, maybe you'll be looking at jets, just like Aaron Amuchastegui is.
Looking at jets. So, I got my shirt on the way. Just got a confirmation. It's in the mail.
Perfect. I actually got 2 coming this week as well. So
2, double down.
Yeah. But awesome, guys. Well, enjoy this show with Aaron, and you are going to learn an incredible amount. So make sure you have a notebook handy. All right, guys, today we are here with Aaron Amuchastegui, and I am so excited. He is one of the biggest heavy hitters in the GoBundance crowd and the real estate crowd in general. You've heard us talk about GoBundance a lot in past episodes, and Aaron is kind of one of those guys that I would say drove me to pursue things like GoBundance in the past, when I was like, how do I get around more dudes that are doing stuff like he is? So Aaron, man, we're super excited to have you on the show. And maybe for, you've done a lot of long form stuff around your background. Maybe just give us the too long didn't read version about who you are, what you do, and it's like the short version of it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for pronouncing my name right.
It's the first time he's ever done that on the show, by the way. He will get the most simple names wrong. So
I practiced it. I have it all like listed out in the different syllables here.
Well, dude, it sounded natural. I appreciate it so much. Sometimes even my co-hosts on my own podcast don't say my name right. And so even though I say it all the time as I introduce myself, so I appreciate that. We met through the GoBundance crowd stuff, and I'm sure as you guys have talked about it, GoBundance changed my life, and I was lucky enough to get in there about 6 or 7 years ago, as it was smaller. But regardless of like size of it at the time, my life has been able to compound very dramatically and very drastically since then. Like since joining a mastermind, since joining that group. As we go into my backstory, I'm gonna start at like when I got into real estate, right? So I grew up in real estate. My dad was a home builder. I got to see a lot of different stuff in the 80s and the 90s. I got to see what interest rates did to developers in the 80s. I got to see the idea of building, having a business as a job. My dad was a home builder, a custom home builder. And so his business was a job. It needed him, it needed his care. And when he wasn't able to do it anymore, or if he was on vacation, like nothing was happening anymore. But it was fascinating to see his version of the business. When I was working with him, he had like built the first hospital in town. We were like the biggest builder in this small town. But then the next time the hospital job came up, he didn't get the job. And we couldn't believe it. Like we had sent together this portfolio. And one of the things they said was like, well, look at the guys that you got it from. Like every one of them like has a bachelor's degree, and their credentials were just so much better. And my dad was like a self-taught guy, had like a 2-year engineering degree. And I said, okay, I'm going to go get a degree and come back to Klamath and run my dad's company. That's as big as my dreams were, right? Like I'm going to go out of town. I'm going to get a degree and come back. So next time we're going to get those big jobs. So nobody can say that anymore. Cause they were like, you're the most qualified and you're the best. And we know you're going to have, the best everything, but but without their credentials, you can have it, which is kind of silly with some of our other stuff too. Like we wrote books about homeschooling and the pros and cons about, education, but I left to get my education, and I went down to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo after a whole bunch of like pivots and like, all sorts of things in my life that put me on the right path and the wrong path. I was a little bit older when I went to school, but I was studying construction management. And that idea was I had already done a couple of years of architecture at the University of Oregon a few years prior. So I wanted to learn about, it was a little bit of architecture, a little bit of engineering, a little bit of construction, a little bit of business management. It was like the coolest degree for what I wanted to go do in my life. And then I got down there first and I realized that like California was the land of milk and honey. It was 70 degrees and sunny every day. And it was super, super nice. And I had never seen something like that. So originally I thought I'm never going to leave Oregon. And then when I got down there, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going back. Pretty quickly, like they would have these companies come in and recruit and like, come in, and it was like the height of the housing boom at the time. And I thought it was fascinating to meet these home builders that were building at scale. And it's a really important part of my story because learning from them about building businesses at scale was really, really life-changing, because I saw home builders that were doing something slightly different. They were building these amazing houses that were 90% as good as a custom home, but for like 30% of the cost. Right? They found out ways to like systematize it to like get the bids in and get the trades in where they could build a house in 60 days. Wow. And they could build it for $200,000 or $300,000. When the way we would have done it with my dad's, it would have taken a year, and it would have been $600,000 or $700,000. Now it would have been perfect. And compared to these other ones that were, I'd say again, 90% of the quality. And so I got to start learning these systems. I thought it was fascinating. What I also thought was fascinating was in custom homes, you sell the house for the cost plus a markup. So essentially he's like, it's going to cost us $500,000 to build this thing. We'll sell to you for $550,000, regardless of the cost. What I learned from the home builders was it wasn't like that. They were going to sell the house for whatever the market told us, whatever the market would bear, whatever comps told us, that's how much we were going to sell it for. If it said we're going to sell it for $500,000, we're going to sell it for $500,000, whether it costs us $500,000, $400,000, or $200,000. And 2005, the crazy part was we were building these houses for like $200,000 or $300,000 and selling them for $600,000 or $700,000, and we were, selling them it was like 2021, right? We'd have a wait list. As soon as you listed on the market, you'd get offers, by the time they finished. So, man, I had no idea how good my life was. We were golfing a couple days a week. We were building these houses. It was like they were selling like hot sticks. Like, man, I couldn't have graduated at a better time when I went to go work for these home builders after. Housing market started crashing in like 07. In 07, it was kind of slow, but we were in California and kind of the hotbed of where it was hitting. So at first it was like, oh, sales aren't happening that quick. And then we still had like pending cash flow coming, but we didn't have any new contracts happening. And then all of a sudden 1 month, like all the revenue dried up and we had to lay off a bunch of people. And there was like 75 people working for the company, laid off 70 of them.
Wow.
I went from golfing a couple of days a week to like doing manual labor and doing these builder workouts and doing like these short sales with these developers. So this is like 08. And by the time 09 hit, we were like, we got to do something different. We were trying a whole bunch of different businesses. As I fast forward pretty quickly, we tried a whole bunch of different things. We got lucky enough to find the foreclosure business. I'll say like we kind of created an industry. There were a couple of people that were buying foreclosures on the courthouse steps before us, but I was the first person to do it at scale in Northern California. I was the first person to say like, here's the business plan as a home builder. I'm going to apply that to this business with the same sales and marketing type teams, the same construction strategies, all of that. From 2009 to 2012, I flipped a ton of houses. It was amazing. I didn't have a mastermind group that taught me about like, long-term holds or investing. I was cocky and I was young and I had, I was like, look at all the stuff that I did. So when there was times I could have made some like better decisions and better planning, I thought I was untouchable. And I wasn't. A big company was getting into the industry, kind of offered like, they came in and said like, hey, do you want to come join us? If not, we're going to put you out of business. I didn't do the research and I got put out of business. It was pretty wild. So then I had a few years where I went from like making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to nothing, to where I was almost looking at getting foreclosed on myself for my house that I lived in. I was like, that was wild. I went and I was trying to figure out what was next. I applied to be like an Uber driver and a building inspector at the city of Napa because I was still doing a couple of foreclosures now and then in like counties that other people weren't touching. And pretty soon after I applied to be after I was like signed up as an Uber driver and had applied for that other job, I saw a new opportunity out in Texas, which in Texas, it was the same business plan, foreclosure business. I learned so much from like making lots of money and losing it all. I said, if I ever get another chance, I'm going to do this, this, and this. I fell into an opportunity in Texas where when I got there at 2015 at an auction, nobody was there. So I was like, this is like 2009 all over again. This is my big second chance. I had years of knowledge and years to think about what I did wrong. What am I going to do different this time? I remember going to an event in like 2014, 2015, this single family rental conference. And there was only 7 companies that owned 1,000 houses or more at the time.
Really?
And
only 7?
Wow.
That's
only 7
what do you
owned
think?
1,000 houses or more.
What do you think that number is now? Just, I guess, for context, 8 years later?
I think it's probably in the hundreds and the few hundreds. Now, a lot of them kind of conglomerate and like jump together. Sure. But at the time, and now they're bigger too. Like one of them was Invitation Homes, who had maybe like 10 or 20,000, let's say at the time. And they were like the biggest one. They were Blackstone. Those were the guys that came to talk to me about joining them, or they were going to put me out of business. And now they have hundreds of thousands, So, but I remember thinking like, there's only 7 companies that have 1,000. I'm like, I flipped 1,000 houses. That wasn't that hard.
Right.
Like, and I also remember thinking when I was broke in like 2014, like, man, if I'd have just kept 50 of those 1,000 houses or 100 of those 1,000, I would have been set for life. So when I got my new second chance, I focused on that. And I had, so from 2015 on, I kind of focused on buy and holds, similar business plans. I got really, I combined like a lot of effort with a lot of luck. When I started buying in Texas in 2015, that's pretty early for Texas. And I remember thinking prices have never gone up in Texas. So I don't want to ride the big waves like we saw in California of houses going up and then crashing and the house going up. I said, I want something nice and stable. I'd fly out to Texas every month. I'd buy houses at auction. I'd fix them up. I'd rent them. I kept doing it year over year. By the time 2020 hit, I had a ton of houses out there. Prices obviously ended up going up. And so I started building my wealth strategy that way instead. And a combination of like sometimes would flip them to make some money to pay for stuff and then hold as rentals. So that's my Cliff Notes version. There's some podcasts out there where we talk for an hour before we get to that point. There are obviously a lot of lessons and up and downs in there, but that's what got me to this buy and hold strategy that I do now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot.
And I just love that that's the Cliff Notes, because that's like the lifetime of a lot of people,
Yeah.
you know. And I guess for a teaser for other people, if you like that backstory, Aaron has, you know, parts of his story about where he's in prison as like a youth. You have parts of it where, you know, you're getting very close to bankruptcy, different things. I know your first business that you ran, I believe you actually had to lay off all of your staff, and that was like a whole ugly situation, and you lost an incredible amount, even on top of just like the $100,000 in income going to zero. You actually got in a lot more financial trouble, if I remember correctly, from stuff that I've heard. And so that's all mixed into that really incredible growth that you just shared in what, like 8 minutes there. So no, that's super good stuff. And one of the things that I really admire about all you've done is you've done all this rise and you're still going, but you're also not like a square. Like, you do a lot of cool stuff. You're always like going to concerts and you're playing golf and you're traveling and doing all those sort of things. So what I would love to dive into is, as you know, you're building all this out, the systemization of all of that, right? So like, most of the people listen to Collecting Keys, they have small businesses, are looking to know how to scale them. That what you built there, I mean, you say 2015 to now you've done all that much, but it's 8 years, but that's not like an insanely long time. And I imagine you must have started off, you know, even early on at a pretty high velocity. So what's your secret behind that? Did you start as like a workaholic? Did you start like team first? Like, what does all that look like on the back end?
Yeah. It's, you know, as you touch on like the close to bankruptcies and things, like I went to zero probably 3 times.
Yeah.
And I went to like more than multi-millionaire to zero, like 3 times, which is like having to start over a few times is brutal. You think you only need to learn it once, but that should give a lot of people hope. If you get to see like what I'm doing today, is it's thinking about in 2015, I was broke 100%, like zero.
Wow.
I was starting at zero. I was going to be an Uber driver and was trying to figure out like, just so I wouldn't get foreclosed on. You know, one difference when I started over in 2015 and why I started going so deep into systems is when we did really well from like 2009 to 2012 in auctions, there's so many steps to auctions that are required, right? You've got to drive every house. You've got to do title on every house. You've got to comp every house, auctions happening every day. So you're looking at 500 houses a day in order to try to buy 3. You're trying to buy 3 houses out of those 500, but you have to do so much work on all 500 in order to get those 3. And so it created a lot of different tasks. And I remember when I got put out of business in 2013, that the biggest reason was my overhead was so huge. Had all these employees, all these company trucks, all these team members that were doing different things. And we had pretty good systems, again, like putting them into spreadsheets. But I just remember thinking like, what broke me wasn't buying bad deals. What broke me was having too many employees and too many expenses when I didn't have income anymore. And so when I restarted in 2015, I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss. You know, for anyone that's one of my most life-changing books ever. I read that and The Miracle Morning at the same time when I was trying to rebuild my business. And those 2 books changed my life, saved my life, really. And when you combine them, it's even better, because if you're getting up early and then you're doing the 4-hour workweek practice of working really effectively and hard between like 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., you really have the rest of the day to like work a second job or do whatever you want. But in 2015, when I restarted, I remembered thinking, I need to have a better system. I need to do this better. I need to figure out how to be able to do the same job without having 20 or 30 employees and without having a bunch of company cars, because that's where I got into trouble last time. And I was making so much revenue on the top end, it seemed like adding a new employee every time was like no big deal. And so when I went in and started building the system the next time, there was this mindset idea of every decision you make has to be the long term for the system. And so I'll get into that. And then I also started figuring out how to build software essentially to take the steps and streamline different things. And so some of that was first using a CRM. And then it became to me like designing my own thing, essentially with PowerPoints, and then finding a team in India that could essentially build out my brain as a CRM, as a process to start building out these systems and then coming up with the SOPs. So the idea was, I was very intentional in 2015 to have systems. Now I have a bunch of systems inside that company as you build. The first thing I said was you have to think about, as you're building your company, you're building it as the long run for scale and for a system. And so like, what does that mean? You can hire a contractor and use them one time and finish the system and like during the negotiations, if you're like, so you usually say like, oh, we're not going to pay a deposit, but you really want to get this first one done. And you know, he's a decent price. So if you pay him a deposit, you can get done and this job will get on the market next week. And so that's like a short-term solution. You know what? I'll just make it work. I'll focus on it. I'll have to do a little bit of extra management. Maybe I'll buy the materials over here and we'll do it this way because I want to get this job done. Now, the long-term way of thinking is going, oh, if you need to be paid a deposit, like you're not a big enough contractor to actually be able to do 20 houses a month with us or 30 houses a month with us, and you're not going to be able to grow to that business mindset. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to keep looking for somebody that I want to test out and see how they're going to work in the long term. Same with like any sort of trade, like painters and HVAC contractors and landscapers. Once we found like the trades that we really, really liked, it's not uncommon, and it's still not, and now even in Central Texas, it's not uncommon for us to be able to buy a house on Tuesday. We go back to the office. We get some pictures set up that are part of, somebody goes to the house and rekeys it and they take pictures that are part of our SOP. They know which 100 pictures to take. They upload it to our app. We do a couple drag and drops and saying what trade is going to do it and what day. And we say go, and it sends an email. And 6 days later, that house is going to be painted, have new carpet, new appliances. It's going to be cleaned. The HVAC is going to be detailed. Like everything's going to be done, and they're all going to be done by a subcontractor. So our houses would get done in 4 or 5 days. I've got a lot of YouTube videos of some crazy flips that were like gutted to the studs that we did in 4 or 5 days. And those ones even had like new granites, new countertops, everything. But that was all based on a long-term system. So finding the right painter, he was the 10th painter I hired, right? And I tell people, like, if you're trying to build a system, like you're going to hire 10 painters before you find the one that you're going to use, or you might be getting quotes from 10 before the one you're going to get to use. And then once you find the one that can be a part of that system, that's that first step. I remember the landscaper on like the 4th or 5th job, she had sent a quote for me to do the work for like $4,000. I approved it, said 4,000 is good. After the job, she said, hey, Aaron, I ended up being able to do it for 2,000 because we were able to save the grass in the backyard. I'd never seen the house. I was never going to see the house. If she never told me that, I was never going to find out. Right? If she would have sent me the 4,000, I mean, I approved. I said, I'll pay you $4,000 to do it. And she said, hey, I did it for 2,000. Now, what's awesome is I never had to double check her pricing ever again. For the next 7 years, she became someone I could trust. I had a window guy do the same thing. Like he was like the 6th or 7th guy that I was using. And there's a sliding glass door that had lost some of its laminate. And as it lost some of its laminate, I told him to go replace it. And he said, it's going to cost me $650. Cool. Go replace it. You're approved. And then he said, Aaron, I got craziest news. I was able to get this covered under warranty because it was only built 2 years ago, even though it was a foreclosure that we bought. Cool. So they're going to send me a brand new door and it's going to get here in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Okay. And he said, but I had an extra door at my office. So I went ahead and installed the door today. The one that comes in for free, I'm going to keep, and I'm not charging you. Right. He could have done the same exact thing. Yeah. I didn't know. I would have had no way of knowing he got it covered under warranty or swapped out the stuff at his house. Like I had no way of knowing any of that. But he said, hey, it's free instead of $650. So then he became my glass guy. So building really good trades, firing them quickly, right? I can't trust you. You're out. You don't perform on the day that we say, you're out. We send the email and you say you're going to paint tomorrow and nobody shows up tomorrow, you're out. So be quick to hire and quick to fire. And then once you find the people that are in, then teaching them the system to go, here's our spec, here's our color. Now, part of that is our carpet company. They know what carpet we're going to put in every house. It's a system. They know what paint color we're putting in every house. It's a system. They know who the other trades are, so they can like coordinate with each other. They can see it on the email they get. They can coordinate with each other. So those are some of the examples of the systems of figuring out like what happens in your business that you're doing it all the time. Some of the other things we started building out with the software is like every time you buy a house, like you're turning on utilities, you're ordering insurance. Every time you're starting landscape maintenance. Every time you sell a house, you're doing those 3 things too. You're turning off insurance, you're turning off utilities, you're turning off the landscape maintenance or the pool maintenance. So we started building all that into our same little system. Where it's like the day that I say I bought a new house, it says, do you want to email these people? It says, yes. And it looks like a personalized email. So that was one of the biggest tricks of scaling was technology. And now there's so many CRMs that people can like build and add on to and use. But any task that you're doing that's repetitive, that you don't like doing or that's time consuming. You got to record a video on how to do it. You got to put it into a standard operating procedures. And then you got to figure out, is this something that we can automate? And if it was stuff that I could automate in like 2015, 2016, then sure as heck, you can automate the heck out of stuff today. Like you could probably just tell Chat GPT to do it now and it does it. So
Totally.
those are my biggest tricks with scaling, is just thinking about scaling for scaling's sake and making the decision based on, I'm not going to do the short-term thing. I'm not going to use a contractor I'm just going to use today to solve my problem. I'm going to wait till I can find a contractor that I think I'm going to use for the rest of my life down here so I can test them.
I love that.
Because I'm going to have to fire 10 of them before I find the one I want. I'm going to have to try and hire 10 of them before I can find the one that's going to happen. So you got to make sure that like the ones that you are hiring have a chance.
Yeah.
Wow. That's like taking, like, I don't know, like the vision I have like of the real estate, like the flipping and wholesaling and just real estate and business in general, is there's a lot of small operators that are unprofessional. They don't professionalize it to the level of what you're saying. You're taking it to the next level. And I have one question for you, because I know a lot of our listeners are thinking this as well, because I'm thinking this is like, when you're talking about hiring these tradesmen, these contractors, do you have any specific questions or process you go through just to hire them? Because when you're doing 20 or 30 houses, right, and you're the big show in town, it's easy. You're kind of in demand for contractors because they want to work for you, because they know you're going to give them work. But when you're flipping 1 to 2 houses a month, that becomes challenging, at least for sure in our market, to get a hold of depth of contractors. And when you're only doing 1 to 2 houses a month, it's challenging to be able to fire a contractor one after the other if you can barely find them, because schedules are challenging when you do find somebody. So do you have any tips on how you're doing that? How are you getting bench strength in your contractor pool?
Yeah. And every time we restart a new market where we're only doing 1 or 2 houses a month, it is a challenge. Okay. Now our first, the first is a conversation. Hey, this is so-and-so. Do you do paint on new homes? Yeah, we do. Are you taking on new work right now? And do you work in this town? And they're like, yeah, we do. And we're like, great. We're trying to find a new trade. We've done, like, let's say you're doing 2 a month, but now you've done 10 in that town, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's taken a year. You're like, so what we recently did, we recently done 10 houses. We've tried a few different guys. We're trying to find somebody, that can actually like deliver, that when we're saying they're going to deliver, that's able to match our unit prices and doesn't have a problem like covering up the carpet every time, because we're still seeing this. And then we want to make sure that we can lock in regular unit rates, knowing that sometimes, you're only going to have to put 1 coat of paint, and so you're going to win. And other times you're going to have to put 3 coats of paint, so I'm going to win. But we're going to give you enough volume, it's going to average out. And they're going to say, yeah, that sounds good. That's something that I want to do, improve myself. Or they're going to say, no, it's not. Now, realistically, 5 or 6 people are going to say, no, it's not. So it's a numbers game of like dialing to try to get people. And the second thing is always at the beginning, like, I don't know you. So they're like, so I want to make a deposit. I want you to pay me a deposit. I want you to do this. We've got a backlog. Now, a year ago, it was really hard. Today, it should be getting a lot easier to find contractors. A year ago, they were like, I can charge you a deposit and never show up. Mm-hmm. And you're just going to be fine with it because it's so hard to get a contractor anyway. So at the beginning, it was having to convince them why to do it, right? Like, I've done these other ones, or here's my plan, or we're doing 2 a month right now, but we're going to be doing 10 a month. And we want you to be able to get on our side. We're thinking about the long game as we do that. And then there's a lot of times now when I say, I have to explain to them too, you can lean us, we can't lean you. And even though you don't know us from anybody, right? Like you can lean us. And then I'll say, like, Google my name, Google my company, like, we're findable. Now, before that, like, so let's say, again, if you don't have that, you'd be able to say, Google my name or Google my company, or here's a list of addresses, or here's a list of referrals of contractors that have used us in the past. So you have to convince them to do your system. Like, why should they do your system? It's like you're having to sell yourself as much as they're selling you. So our initial email that goes out to people after that first phone call conversation, we shoot them off an email and it says, hey, just wanted to follow up again on that chat. Here's some summaries of our stuff that we're doing. I've got a job I could start you on tomorrow if you're ready. Now, for paint guys in particular, first they get a video from me. That's like a 2 or 3 minute video that explains how we do our systems, how we do our processes, how we do our payment programs, and like a little intro. And it's like, and here's our website, and here's this, so like some feel good stuff. It's 3 minutes. Yep. We also have a 3 minute video about how we want our houses to be painted. and like the process for like what people do. And it's literally a step of like in what order they should paint to be able to meet our unit rates. And it shows how we can have houses painted in 2 days with 2 people. And so it gives this big intro for them. And so once they see that, they go, okay, this is somebody that I want to work with. Now, the reality is, even if I've only done one house before, I could have that same set of videos. I could have a video of us painting houses with our processes. I could have an intro video from me, and some of those. So you have to convince them also. And it is, now, if you're never going to do more than 2 a month, Dan, then you don't have to systematize it, because the best system is probably get bids from 5 different painters, because who's ever the most desperate this month is going to do it. Right. Roofers are like that. So roofing in general, we always quote the roofs because it's so few and far between. We'll bid out to the same 5 roofers, and every month a different guy is low, and the prices will range from 4,000 to 8,000. And the guy that was 4,000 this month is going to be 8,000 next month, because now he's busy. Like roofers will bid, whoever doesn't have a job tomorrow will bid it for 4,000. And whoever has a job tomorrow is going to bid it for 6,000. If somebody's booked for 2 weeks, they're going to bid it for 8. And so if you're only doing 2 a month, the system could just be like, no, you're going to just call 10 contractors every time. And the system is a numbers game, and you're going to get quotes from 3 out of the 10, and then you're going to choose. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's total sense. And Mike and I have been through this. And I would still argue, if you're doing 2 a month, for like the folks that happen to be in like our mastermind program and stuff, they're running their off-market business too. They're flipping houses, they're burring houses. Like there's a good level of systematization where you should be able to sit at your desk and do all of those jobs, like running that whole business, but also be able to get a flip done without having to run out there 100 times. And so I think there's like a happy medium, but I love your approach to this, because it's how Mike and I have approached the entire other parts of our business. Is like, okay, we got to look for this as the long-term growth plan. Like, yeah, we're only at 1 to 2 now, but we want to be at 100, for what, replace flipping houses with whatever that is in business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good stuff. And I love too, you're systematizing the communication part, which is usually what takes the most time, by having that follow-up email with the videos and all those sort of things. Like that's insane numbers of hours of just back and forth that you're eliminating there. And you buy most of your properties at foreclosure still, correct?
Yeah, a little of both. I mean, and in that systematizing thing, we see that in Instagram, right? I'm sure you guys have gotten like the video that they say, hey, I made you a personalized video.
Yeah, of course.
And the guy comes on and he just goes, hey, I've been loving what you're doing on social media. I love your page. I love that you're into real estate, and I want to try to make more videos for you. Right. And he sends that video to 10,000 people that are in real estate, and it seems very personalized. And so you can be doing the same thing with your trade communication. You've got 9 different trades. You've got like 9 different videos you're going to make. You have one scope of work that they get to send out that has really clear pictures. The other way is to systematize the constructors, make sure you've got really clear before pictures. You've got this nice scope of work on there. We draw lines to every picture of like the landscaper's doing this, the trash out guy's doing this, the painter's doing this, the handyman's doing this. As we're kind of going through. So, but sorry, remind me of the question.
Oh yeah. So I said the source of most of your houses is still foreclosure and the auction, correct?
So yeah, it was really heavy foreclosure, like 2015 to like 2020. When 2020 hit, foreclosures got placed on a moratorium. And so, for that first 6 months, we were kind of really slow. We were really worried that we were going to see what we saw in 2009. So we fire sold a bunch of our stuff, because my mindset was, hey, if I get out early before stuff loses 50% in value, if the market's fine, that's fine. I'll make plenty of money next year. But if I'm right, you want to be first out. So I'm always the guy to be first out when things start to go wrong, because if everything's fine, then everything's fine. I'm going to make a ton of money just running my business as normal. So if there's nothing to be alarmed about, cool. Then all I'm doing is like leaving a little bit of money on the table by exiting these things early. And next month I go back to my regular business plan, but I'm going to avoid that big downside. 2021, end of 2020 and 2021, we started to find these other opportunities to buy, mostly because we saw the benefit of being through a few different market cycles. And most of the time saying, like in 2009, being like, wow, we discovered it before anybody else, but we couldn't raise money fast enough.
Yeah.
Or even in 2015, like, all right, I had a new business plan, but I still couldn't raise money quite fast enough. 2021 was a unique time because everything I was looking at was saying housing was way, way underpriced, and it was going to keep going, even at a time when everybody else had kind of slowed down. January 2021, a lot of people, the market dipped quite a bit. Volume went way down because everybody had just thought like, whoa, end of 2020 was crazy. prices went up like crazy. Now it's going to crash. It's not sustainable. So like, let's just relax a little bit. So it's a unique time to go like, I see this opportunity coming forward. And I had essentially an unlimited amount of money. I had an unlimited amount of lenders that would lend us super cheap money. I had an unlimited amount of investors that were like begging me to say like, hey, can I lend you money at 7% interest on your properties, and the opportunity. So in 2021, we bought foreclosures, but we also, we bought MLS stuff. We bought new home stuff way back in 2012 when Blackstone put me out of business. Mm-hmm. When they told me they were going to, right? I was like, you're not going to do that well on a rental fund. Like these houses aren't even that good at rentals. What I didn't realize was they were going to buy everything on MLS, everything at auction. Like they bought 99% of the product for sale in that county, period. Incredible. Everything for asking price, for cash, for whatever. Well, 9 months later, everything in that town was worth 40 to 50% more because now there was no supply and people still wanted houses. So 2021 was pretty unique where we saw kind of the similar thing. And so I remember texting a buddy and saying, we need to buy, 35 or $40 million worth of houses in the next 60 days. Send me everything on MLS built from 1985 and newer. Because we're going to buy everything. We're going to buy everything built 1985 and newer. We're going to do the Blackstone model. And then we also started buying these new home neighborhoods then. So 2021, we bought a lot of new home stuff. Had some just screaming deals with that because by the time we got everything we bought in MLS, everything we bought in new homes, 9 months later was worth a ton more. So our bet paid off big. And we got to like really see, some of the other side of that. I bought an apartment complex at the time. So I've got it's like a class A apartment complex that was in the middle of construction. We door knocked it when 3 of the 5 buildings was done. And they were kind of nervous because the market had started to slow down. And they were like, man, maybe we should sell this thing. And so they sold it to me at a heck of a deal. And 9 months later, the apartment was done. And 9 months later, those new home buildings were done. And they were all worth like 40% more than we had contracted them for. So it was
crazy.
Had some really, really amazing bets. Today, I'm flipping like a house or two a month that I buy at auction. But the market's really funny, to see what the next bets should really be. I've started to really kind of tailor and adjust some stuff.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that you were buying all these homes, you're buying them for your portfolio to keep as rental properties.
Yeah. Well, we did. So I did a few different things. So some of them were portfolios with investors. There were like, investors that invested with us way back in 2010 and 2011 and wanted to come back along for the ride. Some of them were just for me and my wife. And I have 2 different business partners that I own. With each of them, I own a lot of different houses, and some of them were just with those guys. Most of it was buy and hold. There was some of those ones that were like ridiculous though, where by the time we closed on it, we're in escrow for 280 and it's worth 400,000 the day that we close on it. And there was like 2 of them next to each other, 50 miles from anything else that we had. So we just put them on MLS the next day and sold them for 400. We just decided to flip them instead. But the bulk of them, 90% of them went into our portfolio. But I think everybody should have a combination of like quick flips for like the fun money. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do a lot of fun stuff. Like you said, if you follow me on Instagram, like half of my life is crazy fun stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to have some of the flips to pay for the fun money. And then the long-term holds to make sure that like, no matter what, you're going to be fine in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great advice right there.
I love it. That's always been our MO too. Why we've wholesaled for the most part. We do kind of like easy flips, but we kept a ton of properties through 2021 and 2022. So now we can keep putting that additional money into the business and take some larger risks. It doesn't really matter because we have a backstop in terms of our cash flow and our rental properties, things like that. It gives you that much more freedom. And, the extra money that we pull out of the business during the transactions, we can use to travel or, do whatever. Dan's got his Lambo coming next week. So kidding. He doesn't. That's his goal. But
I was a car guy.
Yeah. If you're a car guy. Yeah. No, man, that's super cool. So I guess to give a sort of level of scale that you've reached, how many deals have you done now? What does your total portfolio look like, if you don't mind sharing that?
Yeah. I've probably bought 2,000 single families at auction before.
Wow.
We have 850 houses that are mostly in Central Texas. We have some in Arizona, like some in Ohio, some random, like one in I guess I have 2 in Arkansas now. I've got some random, portfolio places, but it's houses mostly in Central Texas. Plus I've got a A 77 unit apartment complex, and I've got some land that I got entitled over the last couple of years that I closed on after I got entitled, that I'm supposed to build a Class A apartment right next to my 77 unit. I'm supposed to build another 96 units there.
Wow.
I own a climate controlled facility in Michigan. That's not a good bet yet. We'll see if that pays off. The climate controlled storage, it's still only like 30% occupied. Big old building. It was all the hype for a while.
Yeah.
And so that's my portfolio now. What we're seeing in there's like a story of a bunch of different worlds right now. In Central Texas, median prices are still going down a little bit. Stuff is slow. I've got a house that I had listed at 460 like 4 months ago that now I'm at 390 and I've got no offers on, and like comps were at 460, right? We're just in a really slow area, and that's a huge decrease, right? That's like a 20% decrease. And it's down, and so it's down like 40 from the peak. So we have some markets that like just aren't that they're kind of stagnant. Yeah. It's like stuff just isn't selling. It's not going really great. We have others that are doing okay, but in Texas, it's like pretty average, pretty balanced. And so like, if I'm not really buying much here unless it can actually cash flow as a rental at a 7.5% interest rate. And I think it's discounted 30 to 40% from the peak. Because if I can buy something that's 30 to 40% less than it was a year ago, and it cash flows at a 7.5%, then what goes down will go up eventually with real estate. Yeah. I started buying in places like Arkansas where the market is going up. So we're starting to diversify a little bit into these other places. There's places in Florida where the market's going up. Washington, D.C., the median house prices are going up. So there's certain markets where you're still getting home price appreciation. And so I am starting to branch out of that. And then we have probably like 150 of our doors in Texas we're actually trying to sell right now. So even though they're down 20% from where they were at the peak, they're ones that don't have long-term debt on them. And we do have a lot of equity in them because we bought them at really, really great times. So it's like, so there's like a development I think we bought for $3 million. It was probably worth $6 million. Now it's worth 4.5. We're actually trying to sell it for 4.5 because we want to pull that cash out for the opportunities that we think are ahead. So we're reanalyzing our portfolio. If it doesn't have long-term debt on it, if it's not an asset that I'm like, I'll be proud to own this thing in 10 years, we're trying to cash out some of those gains that we had. Even though we didn't time it quite right, we should have done it before. We should have sold them sooner. Yeah. But what can you do? Because we think there's a lot of opportunity coming.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, you like to be the first one out. And that's a perfect transition too, because I know that you are somebody who really spends an incredible amount of time, doing your research and analyzing numbers and seeing what the government's doing and the larger financial picture, not just locally, but across the world, and a lot of the different information that you release is such a good deep dive that is very, very valuable. So I guess in your opinion, we're kind of in this funny stalemate with real estate right now. What do you see happening over the next, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years with the real estate world? And I guess the economy as a whole too, because I know you get into a much larger picture as well.
Yeah. Thanks for noticing. Yeah. Right. Like that is my favorite. I try to say that I'm like a trend spotter and like analyst, because all my biggest bets were like that. The 2021 bet was trend spotting and making a bet when no one else saw it. The getting into foreclosures in 2009 on the courthouse steps and seeing that it could actually be, scaled and become bigger than any home builder we ever had, bigger than the home builder I was working for. So it all comes from studying the market, and really people should be studying the market like crazy, because you never know what's going to be that different trend thing that happens. So news is very national and news is very local, and you need to have all of it, right? Like jobs, in certain towns, and like new warehouses getting moved to certain cities, especially small. If you got a town where like population's under like 60,000, a lot of these little outskirt places, one new job source or one new job closing will affect the market dramatically. Right. So they're like, oh, there's going to be 400 new jobs in McGregor, Texas. Like, SpaceX built a thing there, but there's like a new job coming in with 400 new jobs. Well, in that town, there's 140 houses on the market for rent or for sale. You're like, all right, when we've got that many new jobs coming in and there's only 140 on the market, it's going to push the needle. It's going to move the needle one way or another. So like on a very local scale, you want to be looking at stuff like that. On a broader scale, and figuring out like what states are going to start like doing really, really well. I remember at the beginning of like COVID, people were saying like Texas was going to be one of the states that did the best with like the COVID idea. based on where warehouses could get, changed over to, where they could move some of the, some of the systems to, or call centers and things like that. And so you see places like Bentonville, Arkansas, where Walmart just required, like, anybody that works for them has to have their corporate office moved to Bentonville, and they have to move it onto the Walmart. Like, Walmart has this giant campus. So if you're going to sell us a good in Walmart, your executive staff has to actually live in Bentonville, and you have to have an office next to Walmart so they can walk over and ask you a question whenever they want. So obviously Bentonville has been going crazy, and the people that are having to move and relocate out there aren't the small earners. They're the higher earners. They're the people that are earning, a few $100,000 a year and up. So that doesn't really affect the lower level price point there, but it really affects like the $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 price point demand. So there's local things like that happen in markets that you're in, or in markets around. So like reading as much as you can to figure out what areas are going to be different. If I tell you the market's going to go down everywhere, there's going to be some places that'll be different, like Bentonville. Or if I tell you it's going to go up everywhere, there's like these Texas towns that were like all oil based, and as soon as the well went dry, like there are towns that are ghost towns in Texas where apartment complexes went from 10 million to like 2 million. Okay. Some interesting things that we're seeing, like on a more global scale, is we're seeing cap rate compression dramatically has changed office and multifamily. And a very quick example of that is, if a cap rate was 5% 2 years ago, cap rates are 5%. An appraiser would say, if you're making $50,000 a year on that property, or it's worth $1 million. That's it. $50,000 a year profit. It's worth $1 million straight from cap rate. So now cap rates are 7 because the Fed drove prices up. They're going to keep raising rates another probably 3 or 4 times, which will probably push cap rates up to the 8s. For commercial and for anything that's like a B class or below multifamily. So when it goes up to 7 cap, you have to say, at what price is this property have to be making 7% a year on your money? I actually had a little calculate. I don't know if you guys can see that behind me, but it was like, so I had a little. I was actually working through a little number with somebody. So $1 million 5 cap property, when it changes to a 7 cap, becomes a $700,000 property. Mm-hmm. So it has to be worth 700,000 because 7% of 700,000 is 49,000. So 5 cap, it's worth $1 million. At 7 cap, it's worth 700,000. So we have a 30% price decline on multifamily and office, even if nothing went wrong. If everything went right, if your occupancy is still 100% occupied, if you're still super profitable, you lost 30% in value. And the same thing with like commercial and office. The other challenge the commercial and office has had is there's just less people renting. There's less people renting office space. There's less people working in an office. I have a great big office right now, and even come October, I think when we leave that office, I think we're going to go back to remote or something like much smaller. And I'm the biggest tenant in this office. They had a Wells Fargo downstairs, and it was like a bank and the first 2 floors. Now the Wells Fargo's gone. It's like that office building itself is going to go from like 40 tenants 2 years ago to like 4. And you go like, that's going to be crazy. There's a property in Portland right now scheduled for auction next week. It sold for $69 million a few years ago. And its opening bid is $15 million on the foreclosure steps.
I think I saw you post that on Instagram. That's wild.
Yeah. It's wild.
That's wild.
But it's like, and the reality is it's probably worth like 40 or 50. So like someone will probably go buy it at 15. It's not that it's not occupied either. I've got tenant leases on the whole thing. I've got like the breakdown of all the income on it. But it's a cap rate compression combined with 2 different rates. So why is stuff foreclosing, or why would an apartment foreclose? If somebody bought their apartment, like the apartment I got in McGregor that I bought several years ago, we're fine. Like, I wish that it was still worth $15 million and now it's worth, 10 or 12 because of cap rate compression. That's heartbreaking. That makes my balance sheet on my net worth look worse. It makes me sad, but it's fine because I have a long rate on my rate's locked on it. And it's not going to impact anything. Doesn't matter. It doesn't appraise.
Yeah. But
most apartments, and for that matter, like most commercial and office that was bought in the last 3 or 4 years, was bought with short-term debt, 24-month to 48-month debt. And that means after 24 to 48 months, it comes up for renewal. So if somebody bought that $1 million apartment 2 years ago, they probably put $200,000 down and they got an $800,000 loan on it. So they have an $800,000 loan. Today, the bank says, all right, time to get a new loan on it. And we're not going to give you this 5% loan anymore. Somebody's going to give you a 7.5% loan. They go, okay. So then they go get an appraisal, and now it appraises for $700,000. So it appraises for $700,000, even though the current loan on it is $800,000. So then they say, okay, sir, cool. You've got your apartment complex. We can give you a $500,000 loan at 7%. So just if you write us a check for $300,000 on the apartment that you bought, that you put $200,000 down on 2 years ago, and people don't have it. Especially like syndications where they raised money and people put stuff in. And so we're seeing a lot of syndications get foreclosed on. We're seeing a lot of like multifamily get foreclosed on. So the biggest opportunity we see happening is in multifamily, acquisitions over the next year or two, where they'll be heavily discounted. Land development acquisitions that are heavily discounted because they were the same. They're bought with short-term money. They buy them so they can get them entitled and put roads in, and the plan was to flip them. There's lots of classes out there that teach people how to flip land and things like that. Well, it's all done the same thing with hard money and short-term debt. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity in buying those for kind of pennies on the dollar. The commercial office space, man, I wouldn't be I still don't like that industry right now, but buying a $70 million property for 15, that works.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. If it was 70 once, and if it's at 40 now, like that's worth the risk. And knowing that like eventually, 5, 10, 15 years from now, we'll have some cap rate compression where that'd be a huge deal. I remember the Fontainebleau Casino in Vegas for the longest time, nobody would buy that thing because it was so many issues. And it was like a Carl icon. Like it ended up being just a giant deal. I can't remember the numbers on it, but it was like bought for 200 million and sold for $1 billion or something years later. Whatever the number was, whatever proportion, it was like a 70 or 80% gain on something that at the time, no one wanted to touch it. But the reality is time can heal a lot in real estate too. Economy wise, man, I think we're still going to see a lot of economic impact fallout over the next like 6 or 7 months. I thought the Fed was the prediction I made in like September was the Fed was going to raise rates until July, and then they were going to stop. And then 9 months later, we would see the rest of the downfall. I think that prediction is running pretty close, but now I think they're probably not. I think they're going to raise even longer. And at that time, people told me I was crazy. Fed will not raise rates for 9 months. They told me. They said rates will be back down to people thought I was crazy. But now it's even at like they're at month 10. They're probably going to go to month 12, and then eventually they'll stop. Once they stop, it takes about 9 months to see like the rest of the economic fallout of like spending really, really slowing down. And once spending really, really slows down, that's when we'll start to see like the rest of the economic fallout with jobs and with like money and inflation getting under control. There's certain things that are fighting inflation. We could get really technical on, but there's still a lot. So I think we're still going to have pretty heavy inflation over the next, 6 to 9 months. So that's a decent thing for kind of asset stuff. I don't think we're going to see rates below 6, anytime soon for the average home buyer as they're holding. I don't think, to get to 5, I think we're 2 years away from a 5% interest rate on stuff. And yeah, so I don't know, as I dig into the predictions, I think that overall the economy's not going to be great, but it kind of had to be done, and it's predicting it the other way.
Yeah. Well, the big upside's always going to have an equal sort of balancing act, right? Nothing can just go up forever, and people for some reason always forget that when we're in the boom period, right? So
it's so frustrating though, because it's like the slow, and like what you're saying, Aaron, like I 100% agree with you, but it's like it's like a waiting game, because we all want it to be this awesome money making economy, but that's just part of the ups and downs, and sometimes this slow, weird trough.
There's this concept called like buying in the bottom third, and I think in some markets we're probably in the bottom third. And so, what does that mean? So if something is worth $100,000 and it's going and it's going to be worth 50, it's going to bottom out at 50. We don't know if we're at bottom yet, right? But like it's going to bottom out at 50. The bottom third would mean like anywhere between 50 and 66 is the bottom third of the fall. And so if you're going to get back into the stock market or get back into housing or get back into multifamily or anything else, you want to be in that bottom third. It's like impossible to like time the bottom really. And but if your goal is to buy in the bottom third, you could buy something for $60,000 today, and maybe next year it is going to be worth 50, but your 5-year plan, or maybe your 10-year plan, it still goes back to 100. So I think in a lot of markets, we're probably in that kind of bottom third. So that can help some people get a little bit more active, but not with short-term debt. Like just don't do anything like that with short-term debt. It's like if it can cash flow at 7.25 and I can get the 7-year loan on it, then I'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for the average investor out there, I'd say like the average investor that is established and doing deals, what do you think they should focus on over the next little bit, I guess, to be prepared for the next opportunity?
Yeah. The two ideas. So to cure boredom, you could still do flips right now with the idea. When we did our flips from 2009 to like 2011, the market was actually falling every month. Median prices were going down every month, but our business plan was we would buy for 70 cents on the dollar, we would fix, and we would sell for 90 cents on the dollar. And we would essentially beat the market, and we would make it turnkey because the only buyers that were buying were first-time home buyers, and they don't have the $4,000 to paint it afterward. They needed a house that they could actually move into and not have to do any fix-up. Way different than 2 years ago, right? So that's the business plan. Turnkey models, first-time home buyers if you're going to flip houses. And you have to only do it if you can buy it at a rate that you can fix it fast enough. Now it's like that race too. Like you have to, if you can fix it for a week instead of a month in a falling market, like that de-risks you. And then to where you can sell it below market and still get it. So if you're buying wholesales off market deals, that is possible. But focusing on like the house that I have that like we've had to drop 20% on in the last 2 months, it's not a first-time home buyer market. It's a mid-level average market, still in a hot area in Austin, right? But it's like dying. Whereas the first-time home buyer markets are still selling. So that's what I would focus on for like quicker flips. The only time I'm going to do a long-term hold and be adding to my portfolio is if it's in the bottom third and if it cash flows at today's values, at today's long-term loan rates. If someone's going to buy an apartment or a commercial deal, it better be at least 30% below what it would have been in May 2022. Because of just the cap rate thing. So if you're getting it for 20% below, you are way overpaying, right? If they're like, this thing was worth $1 million May 2022, and now we're selling it for 800,000. If it's multifamily or commercial, no way. Like, even though it looks like a 7 cap, you're like, hey, it's a 7 cap, it's an 8 cap, it's a great deal. Like you're still way overpaying, and it might take an extra 5 years before you actually get your value out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And are you a proponent of like everyone saying accumulate as much cash, pull all your lines of credit so the banks don't take them away? I know that's been a big conversation in the GoBundance crowd. I've heard, been talking about David Osborne's office doing that. A lot of the other people just basically getting all of their lines into cash with all their liquidity ready, just of the belief that if they do that, the bank's a lot less likely to call things. But
yeah, so that's why we're selling our 150 houses. I had a bank line of credit call it after I drew it, and they didn't have a reason to, and we were supposed to redraw, and they said you got 2 weeks to give us $600,000 back. So I do think you should pull the stuff, but you better have it ready. Because they can just as easily. So there's all these other things that we put that are in bank loans that people don't think about. And it's this extra stuff. Whatever line of credit you have, it probably says you're going to make over $1 million a year on such and such, or your income is going to stay at this, or your debt to service ratio is going to be this. There's all this fine print that we sign in those documents. And we had another friend in GoBundance recently where every month the bank is saying to us, they say, send us over your P&L, send us over your bank statements. And he sent over his. And in his case, he wasn't doing the rule of the thing of like putting the deposits in the right account. And they're like, oh, if you're not going to follow the rules of like using our bank as your depositor, now we're taking your loan away, even though you're not in default. And he had a long-term, like 4% loan that they called, and it was not supposed to be called for 10 years. They'll do the same thing when you're sending over, like, don't just send over your P&Ls and bank statements anymore. Make sure you're within, like what the guidelines are. Because we also run stuff at a loss at different times in real estate. And if you send that thing over, the bank now has the ability to say, you were supposed to be covering a 1.4% debt service ratio. You didn't. Now we're calling it due. So I do think you should call your lines and get your cash ready for stuff. I think there's going to be some banks that are failing. Think about the bank in second position on that commercial property in Portland. There's a $25 million bank loan in second position that's going to zero. So it's a $25 million loan on one asset that bank's going to lose, and mid-sized banks, like that'll hurt all of their liquidity, all of their ratios, everything. So yeah, but it's a good trick, but if you do it, put the cash somewhere where you can actually like move it to a different bank, but like a savings account or checking.
Right. Don't buy a Lambo with it.
Don't buy a Lambo.
Yeah, right.
Or like buy the Lambo, but just know like you might get called, or you might have to sell it. I say one thing that you said it's like, I do a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And if people don't follow me on Instagram, you should. I try to show the balance of all of it. When I went broke the third time, I remember thinking like, man, there's so much stuff I could have done with the money. And I did a lot of stupid stuff with it, but I didn't regret any of the experiences or any of any of the experiences or any of the memories. So it's like, so no matter what, I have the belief that now, knock on wood, I don't think I can go to zero again. I've done pretty good now, but money's temporary and all this is temporary and we could lose all of it at any minute. Right. And so like, you better make sure that you have a whole bunch of fun memories with it. And if you're not doing, and I do stuff to the most epic level, the most like VIP crazy experiences ever, to make sure that I have a bunch of crazy memories, because if I die tomorrow, right, my friends and my family will have all these fun memories we did. Or if I go broke tomorrow, then I'm not going to be like, oh man, I should have saved an extra, I shouldn't have gone to the club last week and I should have saved an extra 20 grand instead of going on that trip. The reality is when you're going to go broke, you're going to go broke. So that's like, you're going to spend the rest of your money no matter what. So like, as you have it, you got to live big.
That's so cool.
So yeah, you heard it here first, guys. Pull all those lines and just blow it on sick life experiences. It'll be totally fine.
Well, if you're gonna go broke, right?
Right.
Go with the bang.
So awesome. Well, thanks so much, Aaron, man. This has been a really awesome conversation. I want to be respectful of your time here. It's funny. I say before the show we go 35 to 45 minutes. Usually it's because most people get boring after about 35 minutes and we call it. But that was a really fast
we got
hour.
Another 2 hours in this here.
Yeah, I know, right?
Honestly.
But no, we really appreciate it. So where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you if you'd like them to do so?
Yeah. My favorite place to like meet any one of you guys and chat is on Instagram. So it's at Aaron Amuchastegui. If you get to like at Aaron, Aaron Amuch, it'll find me. After that, I do I love chatting with people on there. I've got a book called Bidding to Buy. I make like $2 every time somebody buys it, but it has all of my secrets in it. It takes like 3 or 4 hours to read it. I also like teach some classes and stuff too, where people come to my office or we record them and people can like buy the courses. I'm having a lot of fun building out like these masterminds and things like that to try to teach people stuff. But yeah, go follow me on Instagram, ask me questions about real estate. And then I have a podcast called the Real Estate Rockstars Podcast, where I also do a lot of my market predictions and things on there. Any of the big bets that I did, I love to tell people, is all the big bets I did, I call them out and I tell people along the way. So when I was buying all that real estate in January 2021, I told everybody on my podcast, I told everybody on my Instagram story. And, when I like buy certain stocks, and I tell people along the way, and if people would have just like followed along and done the same thing, I don't hold back. So I don't like keep my stuff secret. So go find me on there, go talk to me. You'll see what I'm doing. And if you trust me, you can follow along and play along with me.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Aaron. And you guys definitely go and give him a follow on Instagram. He is one of my favorite follows, and he posts such incredible stuff about, not only just real estate and the economy, but he really does do a bunch of awesome things. Like, I know you're really into like your different concerts and electronic music, and you're always like up on the stage. You're always floor side at Spurs games. You're just living it up, man. It's so rad. So really, really appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully we'll meet you at in person at a GoBundance event here sometime soon.
Yeah, Mike and Dan, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Like, I'm glad to get to meet you here. We definitely need to spend some more time in person, and thanks for tolerating me for an hour, as I knew I'd have to talk fast, but we could have kept going for sure.
Oh yeah, that was incredible. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Aaron, and thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to y'all next week.